Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. Here we are, another session at the AGS Digital event, and it's following the same message, which is collaboration and sustainability. Two great guests here with us today. Firstly, I've got Kam Weng, who's the CEO of POS Aviation. Wu, lovely to have you on board. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Unfortunate to meet over such circumstances, but it's good to see you again. And I understand you're in a great place, so better than us here.
Yeah, well, that's to be seen. But thanks very much, Wu. And also joining Wu, we've got Mete Erna, who's newly appointed GM for Havas Ground Handling. Nice to see you, and welcome for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Chris. It's great to be with you again.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, in both of your positions, so Wu, CEO of POS Aviation, and Mete, GM Havas Ground Handling, you've got huge responsibilities and accountability. So would you just be so kind, very briefly, just to give everybody who's listening just a quick oversight of the accountabilities and responsibilities that you both have? So if we can start with you, please, Wu.
Well, I have basically 5 core businesses. We have ground handling, cargo, in-flight catering, aircraft maintenance and engineering, and of course our new baby, e-commerce. And we talked about that 1.5 years ago.
We did.
Yes, and we can talk a bit more about how that has helped us. But I always say that CEO is the Chief Entertainment Officer. I keep everyone entertained, and we keep the clients happy. And of course, I'm fully accountable for the full profit and loss statement for the entire company. So
very good.
What we are.
Very good. I will remember that. There's some CEOs I work for. I'm just trying to work out what their reactions would be if I said, you're the Chief Entertainment Officer.
Yeah, we keep everyone happy.
That's a great outlook, my friend, a great outlook. And we'll get to that as we go through the session. Brilliant. As always, Wu, it's always good to have a sense of humor, even in the darkest of days. And Mete?
I was appointed just very recently for the general manager position for Havas. I am overall responsible for our operations in Turkey, where we have both ground handling and cargo activities. And also I am responsible for our operations in Riga Airport in Latvia and Medina Airport in Saudi Arabia, where we operate with our own Havas brand as ground handling companies.
Yep, and I know both airports, having worked in the Baltics and also being based in Saudi, so I know both Riga and Medina very well, my friend. And congratulations on your recent promotion. People obviously at the board level, they must have listened to the podcast that we did some time ago where you bought a boat with a hole in. So they need a man who understands what you
They needed a man who knows how to fix a boat with a hole in it.
Indeed. And why he bought it in the first place. Right, really good. So gents, fantastic. Now, what I'd like to ask at the very beginning is obviously this damn pandemic and this blooming crisis and virus has caused so much disruption to our industry and of course other industries. But what have been the biggest experiences or learnings that you've had over the last 5 to 7 months? So, Wu.
First of all, congrats, Mete. Congrats on your new appointment. Great time to be appointed. You have fun soon. I think the pandemic is something that none of us could have ever anticipated, and it's come at such a speed that within 2 weeks, numerous countries closed their borders, and we were hit just as bad. I mean, revenues dropped 75%, and we still have all the people and everything else with us, and we never thought it will hit us in such a global scale. But we had to move fast, and one of the learnings here is that in whatever that has happened, you can have books, you can have contingency plans, BCPs written, SOPs done. End of the day is the human decision and someone who makes that decision, or a group of people that makes the decision, that has to be quick and decisive. Yeah. And above all, throughout this whole process, I think I have come, and the other day there was a discussion also on the impact of COVID, but we all recognize at the end of the day, human talent is still so vital and so required in our business today. And I think, to me, that's one of the biggest learnings, that human talent, at the end of the day, even you go through a digital transformation process, that's going to be the deciding factor whether you survive in this business or not.
Exactly. And and lest we not forget the people, those that have been displaced because of the practical sizing, and obviously those that are carrying us forward. So yeah, human talent can never be overestimated. Thank you, sir. And Mete?
Well, I think I was impressed mostly by this pandemic when I have seen the compassion of our employees, of our people, and of our customers. Actually, everybody was supportive. It was an extraordinary situation that no one would think 2 weeks ago. In 2 weeks' time, everything was upside down. Something new was coming every day, and we came up with things that we wouldn't even imagine that we would do one day. But the employees embraced every precaution we took. The airlines, even the toughest ones coming to us with every single mistakes we do, were all very supportive. They mostly collaborated with everything we told them we needed. So it shows me that when things get tough and you have a bigger, say in brackets, if you have a bigger enemy outside, everybody comes together to get over it. And it was impressive for me to see that.
Yeah, no, it's good. And it's great that, you know, that understanding of care within aviation comes out when it's needed. Hopefully, please God, inshallah, whichever body is being worshipped, it will happen and it will stay with us after this pandemic is over, because it's necessary. Now, it also gave the opportunity to get rid of an awful lot of legacy waste and to focus on critical areas of the business. So I've been using the CIR term, so critical, important, and recommended. And at last, you know, people realised you've got to focus on the critical first, instead of, like most people do, they tend to work from the bottom up instead of the top down. Now, have you guys seen the effects of that and how you've refocused in your business? If so, what have been really good examples? So Mete, we start with you.
Well, I have a similar methodology. I look if it is urgent and important. Then you have to go, because in this position you definitely have to prioritize the things which are waiting your action. I think in this pandemic, obviously the most and the foremost most important item was the human factor and the health of the employees. Obviously, we had to take some critical decisions, because in the end, you have to either sacrifice or risk the health of your employees, or risk the sustainability and feasibility of your business at one stage. But I think we were lucky that we have seen the support of our customers in almost every case. We had to sacrifice service quality at some points. I mean, even the passengers, they were very understanding, very supportive when they had to wait longer, when they had to receive all the reminders coming to them in that difficult time. So again, we have seen that the human factor, is exactly what you mentioned, was the key to get over every kind of difficulty we have, regardless of them being technological or procedural or regulatory. The human factor has become the key.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, taking that that reference, Mete, with regards to human factors, and Wu, I know how much you focus on believing in people and you know, talent and also leadership. It's almost as if the industry and many other industries now has to rewrite another chapter in the SMS manual with regards to human factors because of all these different variables that are coming into people's lives now. So from mental health, worrying about jobs, worrying about relatives, whether they're going to be ill, who's looking after the children, who do you mix with, how much do you have to go over and above what's expected in the workplace, etc. How have you addressed that particular area of, in one case, I would say support of your employees and support of the business, and in the other, in, you know, bringing confidence to the consumer, to the customer, and to the employee?
Well, I just want to just mention here, I think one of the major learning lessons that, and we are lucky enough to be in that position, is that the company needs to be agile and being able to adapt to the situation. So when this pandemic hit, as you said, the first things that we did and some of the things that we had to quickly put in place was, and this saying goes where someone has always said this to me and I always hold it in my mind. Revenue is vanity. Profit is sanity. Profit is sanity.
Yeah.
And cash is reality. So immediately we had to manage the cash, look at what we can last and how long we can last with the cash in hand. We are lucky enough to have a certain amount of funds available. So we had to immediately, I wouldn't like to use this word, but prioritize who we pay and how we pay it. And then reassure all our staff that their jobs are safe. I think that was the first thing that we had to do. And to today, we are a bit odd in the sense that we have not removed a single staff, because job protection was one of the key priorities of the group. And that is purely because of a certain principle that the shareholders have. So we have done that. We talk about safety of people. We immediately split the teams into two, told them they couldn't meet each other. People found it strange. Why can't I meet this guy? I mean, I see him every other day, but we had to put in very strict measures that you can't report to work on the same day. You can't be in the same room. And that became a bit of difficulty, but people got used to it. And very quickly, we realized that we don't have enough PPE.
Yeah.
Just before the pandemic, a mask, 3-ply disposable mask, cost 30 cents, Malaysian cents. Yes, exactly that one. Whatever color it comes in.
Yeah.
But during the pandemic, it went up to 3 ringgit 90 cents, 13 times the price. And if you had the money, you couldn't even get it to your company. And we were counting the number of pieces we had versus the number of days that the next stock will arrive. So these are some of the critical factors that we had to immediately focus on. And I think we are lucky enough that we had good people with us, and then making sure everything got into place. And at the end of the day, assurance that the people are safe with the job for first priority. Secondly, we provide the PPE to them so that they can work safely. The airport is the first point of contact, and I still remember flights coming in with everyone in masks, and there are some flights now taking off with full gear. People wearing the full suit going off on a flight. So that's still scary, and that's what we did, and some of the quick lessons we learned. But we are quite lucky as far as certain parts of the business, equipment-wise, we are asset-light. We have a managed service contract, so we just offloaded whatever equipment we didn't need, and that was the supplier that took the brunt of that risk and cost. But of course, we have to work with them. They can't survive if we don't help them. So we got a discount from them for the reduced number of inventory we use, but we extended the contract in the future. So they have a longer contract. So that's the collaborative effort we made. That's how we've moved. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the flexibility is so important. And what about Wu? You know, a different type of leadership approach, because obviously, when you're asking people to do things, and when you're expecting people to do things, and you're directing them, you do it in a certain way which is operationally focused. Whereas now you have to take in the psychological effect that this virus has had on people, and how it impacts their concentration, their effectiveness, their appreciation of a bit more stress at times. Have you done anything different with your leadership training, or like we said, you're a new chapter of SMS under human factors?
I think all we did was, I think, improve. One of the first things we didn't do anything much in terms of training, because a lot of training was called off, but the communication was very important.
Yeah.
How we communicate on a regular basis. We have a daily broadcast and we have a weekly broadcast. And then we focus on, I think it wasn't so much of saying that we do this, we do that. It was more of saying we care for you, we understand the problem we have, but let's work together to overcome this problem. So that was the approach that we have adopted. Human factors has become a huge issue, because as people stay at home, work from home, there are psychological effects of that as well. So we are trying to address those through this constant communication, reassuring them that this is something that they need to adapt to, is the new norm. Wearing a mask in the office for 8 hours is also a norm. And of course, we also have a look at, we haven't done that yet, but there are companies that have gone to get a clinical psychologist to be available to staff to approach. Yeah.
Yes.
But we haven't done that yet. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing how the landscape is changing now, and what companies and leaders have to take into place. It's amazing. And Mete, on your side, what have you done differently with your guys on the ground, and the pressures that they're under, and especially like when you're dealing with predators, or you're having a handball onto passenger aircraft? What have you done differently to make them understand and appreciate what's being done, with the fact that the mitigated safety is at the forefront of all of your objectives?
I mean, I cannot judge how differently we did, but basically, I prefer to travel directly to some of our over 30 airports to be present in person and ensure our employees about what kind of policies we are going to apply. But regardless of how much effort you spend to be there present and to communicate directly, in the end, it comes to local leadership. If you are managing some 30-something airports, your leaders in that position managing that airports are very critical. So mostly we focus to support those people at first place. So they were well aware of what was going on. They were able to locally explain, and we kept the same standards all around the network, kept the communication channels open, and then at one point you have to leave it to them. You cannot control everything. I think this was one of the things that I had to learn in my new position. You cannot control everything regardless of how much you try. So I think this was the key in our success. One of the messages that we tried to underline strongly was that we would distribute the burden fairly between the stakeholders. I always consider a company like a chair with 3 foot.
Yeah.
One is shareholders, the second foot is the customer, and the third foot is the employees. You have to keep the good balance between all these 3, because if you lose the balance for one, then the whole chair falls down. You don't have 4 foot to support the lack of one of the 3. So this was the message, and so far, looking at their reaction, I feel like we were able to keep that promise so far. We had very good support from our employees. When we said we will distribute the burden equally, also meant that the burden would be distributed equally between the whole employees. The management, from the top management coming down to the lowest level blue collar worker, the burden was distributed equally. Everyone sacrificed, and that allowed us to keep our promise of keeping the jobs in the company, exactly as Wu was telling. I think this was the key. Everybody was able and aware that they will make a sacrifice. It's something we have to go over by making sacrifices, but it was important to keep their hope that when this thing's over, they have their job waiting for them.
Yeah.
So far, we didn't also lay off anyone, thanks to government support and thanks to our flexibility also in the company in managing our workforce. We only had people who left the company on their own preference. Other than this, we didn't lay off anyone, and we don't plan to do it if the things stand the way they are. We are using partial work schemes, meaning that we have unpaid leaves distributed to our employees. Some of them are doing maybe 20 days work. Some of them are doing 25 days work. But instead of losing our experienced people, we distribute the burden equally to them because we know we will need them.
Yes.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah. And I think one thing that history teaches us is no matter how bad a situation, that situation will always move forward and move on. And another important factor in our industry is the level of experience, training, licenses, etc. And it's so difficult to get good people and bring them back on. So to try and keep hold of people as long as possible is such an important thing, or at least if they have been displaced, keep them involved and included so that when they do get an opportunity to come back, they don't feel alienated or too far behind. So no, I think what you've both said there makes an awful lot of sense. Now, moving over to you. Sorry, Wu. Yep.
Can I just add something? I think, you see, one of the factors here is that at the end of the day, when we cut back and the schedules are such that it's so minimal, we didn't lay off anyone. So obviously, one of the first things that go, of course, we let go all the vendors, but the staff themselves do not have overtime. And in our part of the world, overtime represents a substantial portion of their salary, the gross take-home pay.
Yeah.
So they lost that, and that became quite difficult for a lot of people. And you might not see it, obviously. So one of the things we did was we set up a food bank, and we distributed food to the staff who were in need of such essentials, so that they don't go hungry. Let's put it that way.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's a great example, and it's also a reflection of the industry we're in as well, because as you said, and all over the world, so many people actually rely on the overtime, and in many cases they expect the overtime. And when you do that and things are overstretched, it's just like a business with cash flow. If something goes wrong, it's a very dangerous situation to be in. So I think there's many areas that are going to have to be looked at after this particular pandemic, because, the way that we have seen how affected companies can be in such a short period of time with cash flow, with certain business practices, just in time, everything at last minute, it's not necessarily the right way. So, this globalization and doing everything just in time, there's going to have to be a little bit of, home sourcing and making sure you've got enough. Instead of just in time, now it's going to have to be a bit of just in case. So I think that's going to change an awful lot. Now, Wu, whilst I'm with you, can I ask you, now obviously you've got quite a cross section of industry responsibilities, but two of which are cargo and e-commerce. Both have had a purple patch or a real busy period. So how has the cargo and the e-commerce operations affected your business?
On the passenger side, ground handling and even catering, where it's dependent on passenger volume, we have seen as I mentioned earlier, 75% drop in revenue.
Yep.
Cargo has experienced a drop, though less. So it was about 37% drop, purely because there's less belly capacity. So that has an impact on volumes. But still, at least that has helped to buffer the drop in business. Now, I think we spoke about this 1.5 years ago about e-commerce as the next new frontier. So I don't know. On hindsight, it's always easy to say. The volumes in e-commerce has doubled and tripled in some cases.
Yeah.
So that has brought in certain revenue streams that help us soften the blow from the ground handling side. So I would say that it's a blessing that we had that business, and now we are launching even a bigger logistic park in KLIA, where the Alibaba China businesses will use this as a regional distribution hub. So there's still a huge potential to tap. It's the next growth area, and volumes, as I said, have doubled or tripled. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on that, but I think you and I know it's a different business from the normal cargo. It's a different animal, and we're still learning. So we're working hard on that now.
The whole industry, apart from the specialists, is learning. They're not sure what to do, how to do it, how to combine, how to form a supply chain. It's crazy. And until everybody gets together and they have from first mile to last mile all included, it's going to be very difficult. But everybody's going to get the overflow of the waterfall. So
hopefully.
Yeah.
We hope it's going to be a thunderstorm, not just a drizzle.
Exactly. Now, it's changed. I mean, it's incredible when you look now at the amount of changes in business and high street shops and retailers and services, and now it's amazing what's being done, which brings opportunities for many.
It does. And different, I don't know how you see it, but the e-commerce market consists of different parts of the business. There are those that the traditional items, but we see a huge surge in fashion. The e-commerce fashion side is the fastest growing, and it's high value, and they've beaten their targets by 6-fold. So quite surprised by that. So we are.
Well, there's even Zoom fashion now. So now that people are not going out and socializing, they're using the Zoom platform to show it's changed from having all fancy books behind you when you're in a business meeting to now what do you wear and why it's important to be seen on Zoom with the same outfit. So it's crazy.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, and we are still learning, and we're trying to adapt to that new e-commerce animal, as we call it.
Yeah. Which is why it makes sense to have a uniform on, which gives people less pressure as to what they should wear when they're on Zoom.
The easiest thing to choose from your cupboard.
Exactly, my friend. Exactly. And what about you, Mete? Obviously, from the cargo side, obviously things have to keep going, and cargo has had a profile escalation now that's been long overdue. But people realise that cargo is keeping the wheels of the world turning. So it's been a big boost, and more importance now from everybody, from airports, from airlines, from authorities, regulators, representative bodies. Cargo is really seen now to be so important.
Cargo before the pandemic was consisting almost 20% of our profitability. So it was already an important part of our business. But in the pandemic, it has become a much more important revenue stream. It was like a helpline in managing our cash. And like everybody in the industry now knows, we had airlines who used passenger cabins to carry cargo. We were lucky. We had customers who had their freighters fleet, so they were able to operate. But in the early days, we also faced a decrease in the traffic, almost 20%, because of the lack of capacity. But we are expecting to close the year overall with almost 10% more traffic compared to 2019. So the recovery was much faster and already compensated for the loss of the traffic in the early days. So this already shows that this trend will continue, and the importance of cargo will grow also for the sustainability of the industry. And I think it gives a good chance to all airlines. Now they have a chance to distribute their eggs to different baskets. So when things get bad at one stage, then they have another option. I think it's important for all the stakeholders in the industry, also for the airports. If you think they see now there is another stream of the business which goes on when another stream is blocked. So I think it's a good hint for everyone.
100%. Now you like Wu, you spoke about agility and resilience, and Mete, now you're talking about, you know, comparisons and sustainability and how businesses need to continue. From my perspective, I think airports need to take a much more driving role with regards to their own ecosystem and setting certain guidelines, certain standards, certain community commitments. Theirs is an opportunity now, because airlines can fly in, they can fly out, or they can fly away and never come back, subject to what's going on. But an airport and its community has to stay there and attract as much business as they can. So if they're able to improve the infrastructure, if they're able to improve services, if they've got pooling of equipment, if they've got, you know, pricing benefits, etc., it's going to be such a different model, I think, moving forward. Do you have a similar outlook, or do you have a different outlook, Mete?
I think it's very difficult also from the airport's point of view, because ground handling is one of the very few activities in the airport which is actually open to competition. There are a lot of activities which are centralized already. And you have to look after the competition regulation in your country, but you have to look after also for the health and sustainability of the suppliers operating in that airport. So it's a very difficult balance, and probably the answer will be different depending on the size of the operation of the airport. But I think the most important contribution airports could bring to this situation was to push the governments to enforce some standard applications and precautions globally. Because we heard a lot from IATA, we heard a lot from local authorities, but I noticed that during this pandemic, we heard nothing from ICAO, for instance.
Okay, yeah. Obviously, apart from certain speed of decision making and guidelines, ICAO, EASA, we're talking about now the loading requirements on the passenger aircraft for cargo, etc. So things like that. But I agree, there's certain standards now, and what people need. And we spoke earlier about wearing the masks, and depending which part of the world you were in, it's culturally acceptable. So it wasn't such a major issue. And if you now look at where the second waves are happening, and they're coming very, very strong. So the next 5 to 7 months is going to be very, very challenging, especially in Europe, the US. There's areas that are having terrible times now. So that's going to affect the global situation. So to have specific standards and clarity, I think one of the things that hasn't happened is people haven't been confident or capable or determined enough to say, this is what needs to be done. This is what will happen if we hit certain triggers or certain issues, and you must, you shall, you will. Not letting people have their own risk assessments and their own objectives. It needs to be defined. So there needs to be that clarity at the beginning, and then there needs to be that competence, then compliance, and then control. And without that, it's going to be very, very difficult. So, Wu, have you got any opinions on that?
I think in our environment, because the airport authority is a monopoly in the country except for one airport, right? So it's a bit different. They can do a lot more, actually, but they are in a similar problem that we are in, because when the passengers don't fly in, the airlines don't fly in, they get no revenue. So at the same time, they're also constrained by their P&L which is looking, as they claim, worse than ours. But I think we have gone to the government. They have gone to the government, but it needs a bit of a focus to work together to get this done. And it has to start from the government through the airport authority and then reverse as a part of a community to get things in place. But maybe things are a bit slower here. And we are still struggling to get certain things in place. But the good and the positive part about it is, for once, the airport authority is not talking to us as landlord and ground handler. They're talking to us as a partner. So there are opportunities. They're opening up. They're talking about how can we collaborate in certain areas. And when you talk about GSE pooling, we initiate it as a ground handler, and we and our competitor here are going to start a pooling arrangement at a certain airport and test it out. But we are working with the equipment supplier, and it's nothing to do with the airport. But it's something that we need to do ourselves first, and hopefully then encourage the airport operator to then participate in that program and work with us to get things done better. So we are still some way from where we want to be, but what you mentioned about what the airport operator can do, that's a nice wish list that we have. It's not coming through yet.
But please, hopefully it will do. You're talking there about the pooling and the equipment. I don't know if you know Liam Bolger in Luton Airport, but they've had a very successful model. So if you need to make contacts, they've done a very, very, very good system there, which seems to work quite well. Very positive. Now, Jen, topical point at the moment: vaccines. And obviously, people are holding out their wishes for the delivery of vaccines, or better combination therapeutics. But one thing that has happened is Tiaka and Pharma.aero, they did a survey covering 180 odd organisations, from airports to ground handlers to all freight forwarders, etc., just to see what the general consensus of opinion was with regards to the capability of the expected handling, storage, delivery, etc., of vaccines. And it was quite low. But it was also positive that people are starting to set up task forces and work together to define what's necessary, etc. How are your organisations and your airports and governments, how are you working now towards the vaccine conundrum that's expected?
Mete?
Mete, there you go. Polite, as always, Lou.
Thank you.
As always, Mete.
Well, handling of pharma cargo, we have production, for instance, in Turkey, and exports of pharma shipments. But as I learned a couple of years ago doing this business, was that a lot of shipments produced in Turkey actually were being trucked to Germany or other European countries and flown out of there. And that was due to the lack of facility. Yes, we handle perishable, vulnerable cargo. We have cold rooms and everything, but the certifications were missing, and the situation was mostly dominated by the national carrier. Now with the new airport, new Istanbul airport, there is development in that. We have much more bigger space. Turkish Airlines are already constructing their own huge state-of-the-art cargo facility, where they will have a special handling facility for pharma. Now we are working with our customer airlines on the special schemes to handle pharma shipments, because definitely it will be the biggest issue in the very near future, probably, for all the airports, on how to handle this.
Okay, so you're quite confident there's a task force set up whereby you're part of it. Things are being worked on, communicated, because we can't afford for this to be another PPE issue.
Exactly.
Yep. So you're happy. And what about you, Wu?
I think in our part of the world, we are not quite prepared for it yet. Though what we hear is the transportation of the vaccine can be quite demanding. I'm not sure of the temperatures quoted, whether they're real or not. but I was told that you need to have it at a very low temperature. But we do have plans, and we are in the midst of getting our pharma CIV certification.
Yeah.
And setting up a cool pot, but we are still not focused on that purely because at the moment our priority is on developing the facility and running the e-commerce business. But I think, as you rightly said, maybe as a grouping within the airport community, we need to get together and work on this so that we are ready when the time comes. But my question really is, when and what vaccine is going to be available, and whose vaccine?
Yeah, yeah, but that's why I think that's on a government level as to which one and when, and that's why they're hedging their bets internationally. But as soon as the vaccines are available, I mean, it's going to be an incredible logistics exercise that's going to be required. And from the temperatures, like you were saying, you know, people are quoting that some have to have it deep frozen, some have to have it on the regular, you know, temperature range. So there isn't even the firm clarity there as to what's going to happen. But the preparation now is so important. And our industry is renowned for its agility and its resilience once something happens. But I think one of the positives that we've got to start focusing on is how we plan and how we forecast and how we're able to deal with something rather than to deal with the fact that we haven't dealt with it.
Yeah.
Very, very, very different. Now, gents, before we come to the end of the session, if I was to ask each of you, what do you now feel is necessary with regards to whether it be change, whether it be regulation, whether it be compliance, whatever it is, what would you say? And equally, what do you think are the positives that are going to remain once we move from crisis to a more caring environment? If you can just give some opinions or where you think, you know, enablers are going to appear or blockers are going to appear, just so that we get a closing overview from yourselves, from your own positions.
I think it was a great opportunity for us to have what we call a operation reset. So we kind of hit a button. It's not easy. It sounds like you just hit a button, but to redesign our process flows, to relook at it and see where we can improve further, and maybe take out some of the cost elements which can be easily done through a digital transformation. But definitely we were on a digital transformation journey, but it has accelerated it. And what has happened, which is good for the people, is that we are doing upskilling. So there are some check-in agents that we have. Since they are not fully utilized, we've retrained them on RPA. And there's a project on for them to be, now they're looking at the case studies within their division and how they can enhance the process efficiencies using RPA and even things such as machine learning, AI, and so on. So it's a great opportunity going forward to look at redeveloping the talent, reskilling people, upskilling, because I think the part of the business will basically move towards machines and auto check-in, self-check-in, and there'll be less and less human involvement in the process. So what do we use these people for? We upskill them, we give them new skills so that they can do other things within the organization. But I think for us, the digital transformation has a new meaning, and we are about to rejig the organization to make sure there is I mentioned to you before, we have a strategy and innovation team, which is very young, oldest being 27 years old. But now we're going to call it a digital transformation team. Same group of people, but they will need to look at transforming the entire organization to become more lean, more efficient, more agile, and what else we are doing to make it more relevant in the new norm. Because some parts of the business, like in-flight catering, I think airlines will move more and more towards disposable equipment and less, how do you say, complicated meals. So it'll be very boxed meal, and very disposable equipment. So the whole business has changed, but how do we adjust ourselves to that new norm? We are still learning. We're still going through the process. And as you mentioned, agility and adaptability to another crisis is so important. So we believe very much in making sure that we are ready for the next pandemic. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, whatever it may be, whether it's whether it's a virus or any other. But I think the point you've made there, Wu, and what I've believed in for a long time is, you know, you look, and when you do audits on organizations or when there's a tender, you look at companies and you ask them about their business continuity or sustainability plans. And most areas were referring to emergency response, which are the traditional ones. Nobody was actually looking at worst case scenarios and whether or not they could achieve it. And everybody was more hoping that it wouldn't happen rather than why not prepare just in case it does, and then have a generic approach to how you address whatever that particular crisis is. I think the QHS S&E and risk assessments and digital transformation teams now, they're gonna totally change the way the industry looks at things. And you know, when you see that, you know, the last of the 747s flying off to the breakers yard, part of history that, you know, it's sad. It's sad, you know, one eye smiling, one eye crying, because you're seeing the end of something, but you're hoping that something new or different is going to come. And I think it's that motivation and that, you know, that initiative and innovation that's necessary to keep people's spirits high, that, you know, it's not going to be like the world is flat and we're eventually going to get to the end of it and drop off. It's got to be that positivity that's necessary to keep people going. So
it's also very much about change management.
Yep.
And if you have you know, I mean, the demographics, each company is different. And if you have a lot of, should I use the word seniors, they're very entrenched in their ways, then change management is a huge factor. And we are quite lucky because a lot of our workforce is less than 30 and younger people. It's people like me that are dinosaurs of the industry. But getting change management in place is critical. And we have to understand how the young people think these days. It's totally different from how we used to work. And I think this is a good time for the entire industry to change and adapt to the new norms. And this is a perfect time to do it. And it forces everyone to do it.
I think if you're a dinosaur, Wu, then I'm Jurassic Park, my friend. So it's not a good position to be in.
I'm very far off from you, no.
But I think you're right. But the one thing I do also think is this pandemic now has proven that no matter what you think and how much you rely on the internet or the power of these damn things, a certain degree of experience and a certain degree of difference in thought, balanced with a young dynamism and you know, that frontier land, that's the best way forward. And if older people can think like younger people and younger people can think as if they were an older person, that happy balance, and one shares the experiences and the other shares the openness, that will form a totally different culture in companies. And that's the best change you can bring about. It's like passing the baton, you know, and
get, Chris.
Yeah, hopefully. So Mete, how do you feel about that?
Well, regarding the pandemic, I think what I expect very urgently, hopefully, is some kind of standardization in travel regulations globally, intercontinental. I mean, we need something above the national authorities' decisions. That's why I put a big importance on the influence of airports, because in the end, as ground handling companies, now we know how to manage, how to handle, and I see that we will survive this. But for airports, it's much difficult. They don't have the flexibility of ground handling companies. They are big organizations, heavily leveraged, so they need the support of the authorities to bring to make it easier for passengers to travel and to plan for their travel and to know what they should expect when they reach a destination.
Yep.
After the pandemic, I completely agree with Wu's vision. It was something we knew that automatization was coming, and it was a challenge for ground handling companies. This pandemic accelerated this situation, in my opinion.
Yep.
I wish all employees in the industry were as lucky as the employees of Wu, because I don't think all the industry will be able to strengthen the skills of their employees. In the end, there will definitely be some redundancy. So far, we are not seeing this, because when I talk to our customers, I see that actually whenever you invest in some automatization process, for instance, self-baggage drop, in the end, at the moment, we are unable to save on employee cost, because the load of the work which is done normally in check-in now is transferred to the boarding gate. And at the boarding gate, you have a much shorter time where you have to make all these visa checks, boarding card checks, ID checks, and everything. And those are still waiting to be automated completely. It is not there. It is not coming. So we still need that workforce more at the boarding rather than check-in maybe. So we are not feeling the influence, but that will come as well. I hope we will be able to create enough jobs, additional jobs to our employees when this comes. And there is another, I think, challenge facing the ground handling industry is the consolidation in the market, not by the ground handlers, but by the airlines. We are getting more and more big airlines. A lot of airports are now being more dominated by big carriers, and that gives those carriers enough leverage to invest in their own ground handling. Since 97, with the liberalization of the industry in EU, there was this trend of outsourcing, opening to competition and everything. Now I think that almost saturated.
Yeah.
And now I see more and more airlines seeing that with the economies of scale they reached, maybe they are now able to afford to again have their own ground handling. And in that case, the profitability they allow to the ground handling company can be reinvested in the quality of the service they do on their own. I think the industry will go through a period where we will together as airlines and ground handling companies, we will need to find the right balance in this situation, because we will definitely have a place as ground handling companies as well. Also with the help of this pandemic, I believe, because a lot of airlines who started their own ground handling during this pandemic, they have seen 1,000 people which become redundant, and they had to rely on government support to make their operation sustainable when this ends, or they had to lay off those people and they have to trust in their return when the pandemic ends. So it's a difficult situation for everyone. I think this is the main factor which will probably define the near future of the ground handling industry.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, many changes, many things to consider, many initiatives, but please God, everybody will come out of it. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time. You're two men that I know who care passionately, and it comes across very, very easily. So well done for what you're doing. Good luck, and continue caring about your people and the business, and then we'll see what happens. So look forward to speaking to you again in the near future, and thank you both very, very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Yes, please God. All the best.